think we'll get started. So thank you all for joining today. Super excited. I know some of you may have already started the application process. Some of you are maybe just beginning it. Some of you maybe were at launch last week. And we're excited to kick off our third year at MassChallenge FinTech. I'm Luke Lennon. I run our marketing community for MassChallenge FinTech. And I'm going to just quickly walk us all through a little bit of MassChallenge overview and timeline, application steps, and then really what the opportunities to pitch throughout the application process are. And then I'll welcome SEI Ventures on to speak more about pitching, how to keep those different audiences in mind, those different formats, especially in this virtual setting, and how to make the most of it. Awesome. So just as a quick overview, again, I know some of you are already familiar with our program, but we're a partnership model. So we don't necessarily like to consider ourselves your traditional accelerator. The bulk of our program and the mission of our program is to really facilitate those enterprise startup partnerships in financial services. And so that means that when you enter our program, the bulk of your time spent is working directly with one or more of our partners on opportunities that they've identified as key to their business for 2021. So some of you may have joined us last week when you saw our partners giving their reverse pitches. And these were areas that we helped them identify, areas that they really want to work with startups on to solve. And so when you're applying, you're actually indicating your interest of who are those partners that you're most interested in and what are those challenges that you think your company is best equipped to solve. So in addition to that, though, while we're helping our partners become more startup ready, our mission is also to help you become more enterprise ready and really, more easily scale as you grow your business. And so we provide some support in those areas. We try to keep programming light, as we know that, you're running your business and we really don't want to take away from that. But we have three main programming touch points. One time in January for orientation, once in March for our midway point, which we call refuel, and then in June for our finale. All of this year will probably be virtual, just as a heads up, obviously given our current environment. But usually we bring all of the startup cohort into Boston for this time. And traditionally we have 20 to 30 startups in the cohort each year. And so those areas of enterprise readiness programming revolve around, key things that we know startups are looking to, optimize and improve on in these enterprise partnerships. So enterprise sales, hiring and culture, compliance and regulation, marketing, fundraising. We bring in various experts from the community to meet with you directly and help coach you on these areas. In addition, we provide mentor support throughout our network. MassChallenge is really proud of our global network of experts that really are here to help support you as a startup. And so based on those specific needs that you may be having right now in the moment in time. And then lastly, we provide a program stipend for cost of participation in the program traditionally. And of course, we're zero equity. MassChallenge is a nonprofit, and we believe in not taking anything from startups. We're just here to really support you as much as possible. So just a quick timeline. Applications are obviously open right now. They close on October 8th at 12 p.m. noon. And October to November is our judging period where we have various rounds of judging. Your company will be evaluated by multiple people and partners and experts from our community. In mid-November, we're announced as semifinalists. So we typically take around 60 semifinalists that traditionally we'd invite to Boston. Obviously, our next portion of judging will be virtual this year, and that is what we call matchmaking. So that's a 3-day event in December where part 1 is really a showcase and pitches to all of our community. And then days 2 and 3 are more tailored towards private pitch presentations with select partners that are interested in learning more about you. If partners are interested in you and want to work with you in the program, they'll provide offers to you at the end of matchmaking, which will designate your entrance into the cohort. We'll make that finalist announcement of 20 to 30 startups again in mid-December, and then the program will officially kick off in January and run through June. Mind you, we also support our alumni, so while the program is only 6 months, the partnership is our expectation is a partnership will go beyond those 6 months and continue into the future, and that you'll remain, entrenched in the MassChallenge community as an alumni for years to come. So again, I know some of you have already applied, but just as a quick overview, you apply directly on our Accelerate platform by creating your entrepreneur profile. So this is basically your user profile to be on the portal. Then you'll create your startup within your entrepreneur profile, and you can edit this at any time. This will maintain, throughout your time as an applicant, potentially participating in the program and alumni. It'll be accessible on our website. Then once you're done creating the profile, that's when you actually are applying to our specific program. So you submit an application fee or enter a credit code. We're not trying to really, profit on the applications. So you can use this code or reach out to our team if you need another credit code, but today's credit code is MCFT 21 SEI, and that will waive your fee completely. And then you want to complete and submit your application by October 8th. You cannot edit the application once judging begins. You can edit the specific questions around partnerships and challenges that you're interested in, but you can't actually edit the rest of the application. If there's a extenuating circumstance, perhaps an error on the application, things like that, reach out to the FinTech team at fintech@masschallenge.org. We're happy to help you with that, but normally you can't edit your application. And again, the application should only take 1 to 2 hours to complete. It's basically a lot of the information that you're looking for in a pitch deck. So, revenue, funding, team, etc. Pretty straightforward. So as I mentioned, just to give you a visual, this is what it will look like when you enter Portal and create your startup profile. So you'll see mine here, Luke's Brilliant FinTech, our original. And I've entered all of this information, but the key component here that will relate to later what we're talking to is the video component here, which you can upload via YouTube or Vimeo. And that should really be something that, augments your application and really presents information that you and your story that you were unable to really capture in the rest of the application. So again, pretty easy to edit your profile here, and judges can see this dashboard. Once you go from profile, you'll click on dashboard, and that's where you can find all of the live program cycles that you're able to apply to. So this is where you would apply to the FinTech 2021 program cycle. So as I mentioned, there are 2 key opportunities to pitch, and that's why we're here today with SEI Ventures. These are really important components of the evaluation process. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from judges and partners that, the video component really helps add an understanding of your entrepreneurial journey, your company story, and what you may be like to work with as a startup partner for the FinTech program. So the first one, as I mentioned, is in that startup profile. So that's that video that you can pre-record and upload. SEI will talk more to tips and tricks here, but just overall, I'd say keep the video pretty short, no longer than 5 minutes. You really don't want to lose the judge's interest, and you really want to make it something that helps them evaluate you as a candidate. Keep in mind the video will be public, so don't include any sensitive information and don't name any specific partners. You can definitely, and we encourage you to speak to certain use cases that may be of interest to some of our partners. But overall, I'd say really use the video to help them get to know you. And then secondly, as I mentioned, we have matchmaking in December, which around 60 semifinalists will be invited to. And this is our final round of judging. So it consists of, as I mentioned, the showcase and minute pitches. So those are with all 20 of our partners, no slides, very quick. We have a gong, so we'll hold you accountable, that strict minute time limit. And then we have, more importantly, the private 20-minute pitches and demos to specific partners. So as I mentioned, you'll be matched with specific partners based on their interest and your interest. And that does include slides and a demo typically. So SEI will get more into this as we get into this webinar. But just as a quick refresher on our partners, we have the first 2 rows here you'll see are those challenge partners. Those are those partners that you'd be working with directly in the program. The other The other partners are support partners. So they offer various in-kind resources, expertise, and support, from legal support to data support, student field projects, et cetera. And we really see ourselves all as a community that continues to collaborate, which, is why SEI is here today to help you all and bring on some of their expertise. So without further ado, I'd love to bring on Russ Kleiman and Jennifer Ciotti of SEI Ventures. Welcome both.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Luke.
So I'll just stop my screen share here, allow you all to share your presentation, and then have you kick it off. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully our objective today is to give you some really, key tips and hints around helping you perfect your pitch, not only for the 5-minute video submission that you'll be doing as part of the application process, but equally if you have the opportunity to get to that next level, to leverage some of the learnings that you can take away from here. And then obviously more broadly, if you're pitching to enterprise sales opportunities or you're pitching to investors, that hopefully some of the things that you can take away today, you can leverage throughout the journey of your startup. And so with that, we're going to step into this presentation. It's going to go quite quickly, so can buckle in. We've named the number, so if you start to get bored, you know that there's only a few tips that we're going to be going through today. So first and foremost, one of the things that we try to set the stage with is making sure that you understand why you make your pitch. And I think oftentimes founders forget that this is not just a push of content, but it's first and foremost to get information. And again, whether you're making your pitch, and if you have the opportunity to get to that 20-minute level, or you're making a pitch to investors or other enterprises, you're there to get information as much as you are to give information to those in your audience. Equally, you want to gain commitment. And I think that's the one big thing that we often find is that people forget to make that ask. And as we go through this process, Jennifer will certainly make an opportunity to kind of give you a little bit of tips to help make that ask. So make sure that you have a certain philosophy when you pitch. Just don't, I'll say it, don't show up and throw up. Make sure that you actually have a philosophy. And so one of the key philosophies that I take on is making sure that you give the audience a reason to care. Making sure that you give an audience a reason to pay attention and to listen. At the same time, make sure that you want to motivate them to hear what you have to say. Oftentimes, people are doing different things and you want to make sure that there is an opportunity for them to really kind of go, hey, wait a minute, I really want to hear this. At the same time, we want to make sure that you make it safe for people to engage in a conversation and converse and ask questions. So don't just kind of run through it as a bulldozer and really not take advantage of the opportunity to really have that conversation. And then lastly, we want to inspire people to act. We want to inspire people to give us money, to say yes, to take us to the next step, to commit to, a proof of concept or an enterprise deal. And so we really want to inspire people to act. So to be successful, you really must focus on the audience and not on you. I can't tell you how many times we've had presentations where they're just going through their scripts as a founder, as a head of business development or sales, and you're just going through and really not focusing on what's important to the audience versus what's important to you. So make sure you connect with the audience. Use a storytelling approach, and we're going to step into that quite detailed in this particular session. But make sure you use a storytelling approach. Don't start with buzzwords. Don't start with what you do. Start with what inspires you and what inspires your solution to your clients and how you believe you can make that change. And then lastly, perfect your performance. You've got to make sure that you are perfective in how you present. Make sure that you've practiced. Make sure that you record yourself and be comfortable in making that pitch so it feels natural, like you're having a conversation with somebody, especially in this virtual environment. So we talk about using a storytelling approach. And I think one of the key things here is with a storytelling approach, you're trying to get people to care. You make that connection so people feel something, that they actually want to think about something, not just kind of sit there and be passive. You really want that story to connect so that they care and act. They give you that okay, they give you that POC, they give you the funding that you're looking for, you are allowed to get to that next level. And you want to make sure that the problem, the opportunity, the unmet need resonates with your customer, with that potential person sitting on the other side. You want to make sure that they agree with that. And that's where you try to create that safe environment where you can have that conversation. And again, in this virtual world, I think that's even more important. Using a story structure is fantastic because it creates boundaries and kind of sets expectations of where you're going. And we'll talk about how to best do that. So a storytelling approach is great because it takes abstract concepts, and especially in the fintech world, sometimes it is abstract concepts, and it makes them meaningful, makes them tangible if you tell a story. Next is establishes context and creates meaning to what actually you're doing. If you start off with what, oftentimes people don't have the context and they don't understand the broader picture, and storytelling is really important in helping to set that context. Next, it connects people with ideas. They get it, they empathize, they connect with what you're trying to do. And then because of that, it inspires of their imagination and motivates them to act. It motivates them to say, you know what, these guys are interesting. This founder is interesting. She can take this to the next level. And I think it's a really important way to kind of connect with people. Lastly, and next is that it helps you communicate complex things in a simple way. And I think that's really, really important, especially again, in the environment of fintech. Sometimes things can be incredibly complex, but your mission is really to take that complexity and communicate it in a simple way. And I noted on this, it develops empathy. People can relate to that. People can connect with the story that you're telling. If you're just showing them pictures of an architecture or technology or getting into acronyms, people can't connect with that. They can't empathize with that. And then lastly, once they have that empathy, they can create that emotional connection for them to actually care, for them to actually have that connection with you and with the solution or the problem that you're trying to solve for, that unmet need that you're actually trying to address. So why do we call it storytelling? Well, you're taking somebody on a journey, and that journey is a brand new journey for them. And I think that's really important. And this journey can convince them, as we've talked about, to invest in you, to fund you, to give you that okay, to make a strategic decision that says, you know what, we're going to use you for our proof of concept. We're going to use you for our enterprise solution. It's to buy a product or service. Again, you're trying to take them on this journey to convince them. So handhold them as you go through that process. Make sure that they understand the opportunities or those unmet needs. This journey also could be used just in terms of a status update. So it doesn't have to be a sale in the purest sense. So it doesn't have to be your 5-minute pitch, or again, if you have the opportunity to move to the next stage. It can be when you're providing that update in a progress on an implementation. Take them through the story. Here's where we've been, here's where we're going. So storytelling is a fantastic way to do that. Now, how do you start off with storytelling? So many of you on this webinar may be familiar with Simon Sinek, but if you're not, start with why. And there's a great TEDx video on this. Oftentimes, everybody starts with the what. This is what you do. Here's our technology. Here's our natural language processing. Here's our analytics. Here's our digital experience. But nobody really can buy into that because they're trying to figure out context. They don't understand how you do it and why you're doing it. And then if you start off with how, sometimes it's like, well, we're different because of this, but people still don't have that connection. The how is, how are you different? How are you unique? What experiences do you have? What context do you have to deliver against your value proposition? Most importantly, people don't start with their why, because the why is your purpose, your belief, your meaning. What is your mission? Why are you here? What problem are you really trying to solve? Because if you start with why, it creates that connection. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Again, if you look at very good tangible examples in the market, Apple Computer versus name any other computer manufacturer, everybody manufactures the same sets of technologies, but people believe in and they passionately connect with the Apple why. At the end of the day, they buy what they deliver because they believe in the principles, they believe in the mission of what Apple is. You create that emotional connection, you create that empathy, and when you create that connection and empathy, you are then persuaded people to actually make the decisions. So the next key important element to this story, tip number 3, is know what type of presentation you're doing. And I think it's a very critical thing, overly simplified, but it really is important. Make sure that you recognize your audience and the objective of your presentations and what the ask is of what you're looking to take away. What you're positioning for today is thinking about what does that 5-minute pitch look like? Your MassChallenge pitch. That is considered a quick pitch. I can't tell you how many times people have taken their 1-hour pitch and tried to jam it into 5 minutes. That's not going to work. Or take the 1-hour pitch and jam it into your 20-minute opportunity if you have that. but making sure that you understand that there really is 4 different types of pitches: that quick pitch, the investor pitch, a technology pitch, and a business pitch. So let's dive into that a little bit more. What you'll see on the left-hand side here are the key components that make up each different type of pitch. The green dots are those things that you must have. You really make sure that you go through that. The amber dots are those that are more subjective, where if you can have the opportunity to do it, you should, but given the time constraints, depending upon what it is, make sure you understand that. So your quick pitch is something that you need to go through and make sure you hit your why, your purpose, the problem you're trying to solve, why you're unique, do you have traction? And so make sure that you take context to really convince people and get to know who you are and why you do it and how you actually are different. If you'll notice the quick pitch as compared to something on the other end, which is the business pitch. So if you do have the opportunity to go to the next level with your 20-minute pitches, it's still technically considered a quick pitch. 20 minutes is not a lot of time. But here's what I would recommend with your 20-minute pitch, again, if you have the opportunity. Do some type of demonstration of your product, but not a full guided tour of your product. Do screenshots of key differentiators within that and step that through in a PowerPoint experience so people can really connect and it feels real to people. Don't lead off with an architecture diagram, a technology diagram, or other elements that would be more geared towards a technical audience. Certainly, if you are a technical organization, you want to talk about the underlying differences of what makes you unique, but don't start with the buzzword bingo. Start with your business value, start with what problem or unmet need you're really trying to hit, and then jump into some of the other elements. But be always cautious of time. As Luke talked about, there are gongs when you have an opportunity. It's important that you respect the audience's time as much as making sure that you tell your key story.
Now, with 2020 being the year that it has been, we thought it was very timely to talk about our new normal and how to deliver great pitches and not just do so in a normal environment, but in our current remote and virtual world. So let's start off with some things not to do. So first of all, do not go into witness protection mode. Do not show more of the walls than you. You are the presenter. Don't look down at the camera. Don't use bad or awkward angles of yourself on the camera while you're pitching. Don't use non-professional backgrounds. Everyone knows you're not on vacation. You're trying to do a pitch for your company. And try to avoid having really bad lighting. You can try to troubleshoot in your apartment or space if you need to do that, but make sure it's not poorly lit. So perfecting your pitch is something that takes a lot of energy and practice in any environment. But in today's world, it comes with its new set of added challenges. So first things first, we always recommend leaning into video, whether that's a 5-minute pitch, a 20-minute pitch, or an hour-long investor meeting. Try to always lean into video, even if it's something that you might not be comfortable with at first. There's a lot of studies out there that show 55% of communication is nonverbal, and without being in person or across the table, you may miss on some of those cues. So we always recommend the second best thing to face-to-face is really that video opportunity. The second thing is investing in a good setup. Now, we don't mean spending hundreds of dollars on a production crew or a studio setup in your home or your office, but figuring out those few things that would make your setup more professional or fixing anything that might need some assistance. So a lot of times our cameras or our microphones with our laptops aren't the best. So there's things out there like ring lights, additional webcams, or just a good audio tool. So try to invest in those things to really make sure your pitch goes smoothly. The next thing is creating a dedicated presentation space. Now you may have to get a little creative. It may be at your kitchen table, your basement, in your living room, wherever that space is, but really try to invest in that space and make it a dedicated space for your presentations and pitching. And be aware of your background. So try to have your space neat, use things like books or artwork or plants, this is Monty, as your background, and just keep it clean and professional so people can focus on you, who's the presenter. Last, focus on making eye contact. And this is one that takes a lot of practice. I can say I'm personally still working on this. It's really tempting to look at the people you're meeting with in those little boxes on the screen. But what you need to do is look in that webcam tiny dot at the top of your laptop or the webcam that's your additional attachment. Challenge yourself to really do this. When you're looking into the webcam, you help to create that true connection because you're looking at the audience. So that increases your engagement and connection throughout the experience. And the final one is totally a matter of comfort, but something we often recommend. Consider standing instead of sitting. So totally depends on your presentation style, but you may find that you're more confident standing up versus sitting. There's really no rules here. If that makes you more confident in your presentation, do it and embrace that.
So visualization, I think that is also a very underrated element as we think about perfecting your pitch, especially if you are using slides. Basically, I tend to say, look, at the end of the day, PowerPoint can make anyone look like a professional, but the inverse is equally true. It can also make any professional look like just anyone. And so I think you really need to be careful. The key here is some keys to remember. Your job is to walk an audience down a path that they've never been down before. So you've got to make sure that you capture their imagination, keep them engaged, and making them wanting more, not making them be confused and really kind of looking at the slides in a really intent way. The next one is when you're communicating a concept of an idea, make it feel real. If you have a prototype, show the prototype within your slides, but make it clickable. Don't be relying upon the technology, especially in a quick pitch type of opportunity. Making sure that the art of communicating is taking something that is complex and making it simple to understand. It's not showing the complexity to everybody in the world. Simplicity is key. Simple messages, simple graphics, and simple transitions, but it doesn't mean boring. Making sure that it's easy to understand and communicating your value is really the key mission that you're trying to achieve. Use examples whenever possible. And that's a really important element in this, and don't get lost in the minutia. Don't get lost into data and have people trying to do math in their head or trying to follow a bouncing ball. And lastly, communicating with data in charts, while impressive, can also be very confusing to people. Make sure you know what is important to them and to that audience, and not just about you showing the complexity of what is there. The next key element is, when we talk about knowing your audience, is do your homework. Make sure you know who you're talking to, both the organizations and the individuals for which you're pitching to. Now, in the 5-minute pitch, you don't necessarily know that, but you know the landscape of the opportunities and the challenges that you're presenting to. As you get further down the process, or again, beyond just MassChallenge, always make sure you do your homework. So know your audience, research the companies that you're presenting to, look at their corporate website, look at their LinkedIn pages, look at their products and services and press releases, their thought leadership that they may be producing, and do that research. Can't tell you how many times people have looked up SEI Ventures, and there's an educational tech SEI Ventures, not a FinTech SEI Ventures. So make sure you understand who you're talking to and make sure you can make that connection. Next is understand the challenges that the companies want to solve. Really immerse yourself and gain empathy into those particular challenges through your own research and learning. If somebody's talking about digital engagement, how do they frame digital engagement? What does it mean to them? It may mean something different to another organization. Make sure you really understand and have a connection to those challenges, so as you tell your story, you can create that connection. Next, research each person. Again, if you have that opportunity to get to the next level and engage, on a one-on-one situation, know who you're going to be speaking to. Do some research. Are they quoted in press releases? Look at their LinkedIn pages. Have they presented at different conferences or done thought leadership? Make sure you really understand what problems they're trying to solve and how they look at the world. And you can reinforce that in terms of conversations and engagement within the sessions. And I'll say, no, really do your homework. It takes 15 minutes to really do that homework. Take the time to do the research. Don't make it to be that as you engage with a company, tell me about what you guys do. That tells me and tells anybody who's sitting on the other side that you didn't take the 15 minutes to look us up on a LinkedIn page, go to our corporate website, or read some recent press releases, especially when you're talking about public companies. At the same time, when you think about who you're talking to, you want to develop that conversation and develop the audience. This is trying to determine who are the ultimate buyers of your product or service. Who is your message to? Oftentimes I ask that question of those that we're presenting to, who's your buyer? Who are your consumers of your product or service? And it is an interesting element where people really struggle sometimes to answer those questions. Who are the influencers that can maybe help and coach you along that process, along your journey, especially in an enterprise sale for those who are in that environment? You really want to identify people who potentially are champions who can coach you and support you in that process. Next is, what does each of the constituents really value? Some may value growth and revenue production. Some may value risk and operational efficiencies. Make sure you understand the differentiations between what those constituents might value. Some may value, great customer experiences over the cost of delivering that experience, whereas others may say we need to take out costs and improve our efficiencies. Make sure you understand what they value. And then how you tell your story and how it appeals to people is really, really critical. Once you understand all of that, you can tell your story in a way that connects and creates that engagement.
So piggybacking right off of that, really make it a conversation and learn how to read the virtual room. So remember in the beginning of the presentation, Russ talked about giving information is really only one of three things you're trying to do in a pitch or a presentation. You're also looking to get information from stakeholders and gain commitment ultimately. So first things first is truly engage. So it's really simple now in our virtual environment for participants and stakeholders to put themselves on mute, even turn off their video, and maybe even check emails or their cell phones. The way to avoid that is being a really good, as we like to call it, be a good quarterback and find ways to purposefully engage everyone throughout the conversation. That includes members of your team that maybe they can speak to certain points, as well as the stakeholders that you're meeting with and the team you're meeting with. So keeping know your audience in mind, find ways to use people's specific names and engage them on key topics that they're likely interested in throughout the entire conversation. That allows them to be engaged throughout the entire thing and not become passive participants. So really take command of that space. Also, really try to ask questions. And I know that when you're pitching and presenting, you may seem like you're on a roll and have a lot of adrenaline and energy, but try to find good points throughout the conversation to pause for questions. And whether that's you asking a question to maybe pivot the conversation, or you're seeking questions from your stakeholders that you're meeting with, and that can help redirect the conversation or maybe even give you an opportunity to clarify. But you can ask specific questions to people in the room. So saying something like, Lisa, you mentioned a top priority was focused on digiting the customer experience. Are there key areas specifically under that umbrella that are top priority for you? And that can give you little nuggets of information to carry forward. And then truly listen to comments. So take notes on the kinds of questions that people are asking you and truly listen. It's nothing personal, but take all things, whether it's positive or negative, as they can arm you with really valuable insights and support on moving to the next step or not with this team, as well as any meetings you have in the future with other organizations as well. Try to pay attention to body language. Now, again, this is a little harder in a virtual environment, and you're typically only seeing maybe half or shoulder length up, but do people look distracted? Are they nodding their heads, or are they asking questions? Are they kind of looking off to the side? Try to take note of these things throughout the conversation, and when needed, pause for comments, ask those follow-up questions, and find creative ways to pull people back into the conversation if needed. And then finally, remember, it's okay to respectfully debate. So sometimes you may be in a first meeting and someone's just not seeing eye to eye, or they offer a different perspective. That's okay, but don't let your passion or belief overtake some respectful engagement. You're able to challenge with respect and listen to the response, you can certainly move forward. So my next one, this is probably my personal favorite, and Russ knows this really well. All too often, people forget to make the ask. So we'll be on a call a lot of times, and we'll wait for a startup team or a founder to touch on next steps or make an ask. Time is running out. It's 10:58 before we're about to wrap up at 11. And instead we get okay, this was great. Have a good rest of your day. And while I appreciate this sentiment, and that's a great wrap up, that team misses a golden opportunity to make an ask about next steps, or even just get some immediate feedback from us. So with that, make the ask. First things first here is knowing your goal. So if you know the ultimate goal of your meeting, you're understanding that going in, and you can try to guide the conversation accordingly. Also, this is a big one, but manage your time. So no one else is going to manage your time for you. No one is going to keep you on the clock to ensure that you can make your ask. That's something that you need to plan for, and you can't assume that people can stay past the allotted time for the meeting. So try to watch the clock and leave time to address the ask, or whatever your goal is, with the key decision makers you're meeting with and the stakeholders you hope to stay engaged with over time. The next one is also kind of tough. So just be confident to make the ask. This is sometimes hard for people, or it may feel like you're being really blunt, but it's important. So you need to learn to ask the tough questions, and just ask not even a tough question, but these are little baby steps just to move the process along. So you can ask things like, Does this interest you enough to schedule a follow-up call? Are you interested in learning more and digging deeper into this? Based on what we've learned so far, is this the type of company that you'd be looking to invest in? And why or why not? What are areas that interest them most and least, or are there areas that you need to clarify? Is there enough interest here for maybe signing on a POC and bringing other subject matter experts into the mix for the experience? And finally, do you feel there's enough information to begin maybe working towards commercialization and a licensing and services agreement? So all of these are types of things that can qualify as a making your ask, but please pick one or make something else up based on your personal meeting goal. Just make the ask.
So talked a couple of times about this and throughout this journey of this particular presentation, but practice. And I know it sounds simple and I know it sounds basic, but it's very evident to anybody who's on the receiving end of a quick pitch, a full presentation, a 20-minute pitch, an investor pitch, that if you haven't done that presentation's practice, it's overtly obvious to everybody in the room. So how does that really translate? One, commit to 10 full practice runs with different variations. Yes, 10 full practice runs. Get confident. Don't read a script. Tell that story. Tell your why. Tell how you're different and what you do directly without reading a script, that it becomes overtly obvious. Two, record your practice runs and review. You will be your worst critic, but if you don't record it and review it, you will find opportunities to course correct. And if you don't do that, you're not going to find those opportunities. Look, professional football players, being an Eagles fan, I'm really depressed, but professional football players, they look at film, they look at video, and they are critiques of what they do and how they do it. Be your best critic, be your worst critic, but you've got to record your sessions so you can perfect that pitch. Practice under mild stress. Invite people even in a virtual world, invite people into your webinars and perfect your pitch that way. See what kind of questions they're going to ask. Get comfortable being uncomfortable if that's something that you don't thrive on. Ask for feedback. Healthy skeptics poke at things early and often. Find somebody who's going to challenge you. We wrote a blog post around people that should be in your network, and you should have somebody in your network that you know is a healthy skeptic who's going to tell you what it is, and make sure that you engage them in perfecting your pitch as well. One is identify gaps that you may have missed or additional research that you need. Again, think about what you're pitching and who you're pitching to, know your audience, and you may need to do some tailoring and adjustments as you go along the way. Iterate until the dialogue feels natural and conversational. Again, you want it to be that you're creating this connection, and if it feels rigid and prescriptive, or you're just kind of going with your heads down, then it doesn't feel like a conversation. It doesn't feel safe to engage. It doesn't feel like you're telling a story. And so you want to make sure that you have that kind of rhythm down so it feels natural and comfortable. Next is seek opportunities to trial this presentation before the big day. Again, if you're making a pitch to a large audience or you're making a pitch to a very important investor, make sure that you practice that, but practice it with others so you can get very comfortable and make it to be that conversation.
So the next thing, really tying well into practice. So before you can crush your presentation, you need to be in the mindset that you believe you will. And our tip on this front is to find your very own power up routine. So what does that mean? First things first, find a way to focus your brain. And that can be different for everybody. So whether that's music, a run outside, a brief yoga or meditation session, or something else, find something that works for you and is an activity to settle your mind, allows you to visualize the presentation experience, and centers your energy and the confidence that you need for what lies ahead. The next thing is preparing with big poses. And this may sound really silly, but if you haven't seen it already, do yourself a favor and watch Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on body language and power posing. The research she's done is fascinating, and she constantly talks about how little tweaks to body language and embracing power poses where you stretch out really wide, you feel like you're standing tall. This can not only make yourself feel more powerful, but it also can impact what other people perceive about you. So try doing these power poses. You're telling yourself you're powerful and that you've really got this. And this will help you bring your most bold and authentic self to the presentation experience. And finally, retrain your brain a little bit. So try to reframe nervous as excited. So your body and your brain responds to nervousness and excitement in the same way, but you can interpret it differently. So try to train your mind to perform under pressure and stress by reframing those emotions and telling yourself that this is excitement, not nervousness. And then our final tip, again, this kind of seems obvious in the same realm of practice, practice, practice. Follow up. And I know you think that everyone does it, but you'd be surprised how many people don't remember to do this. And I think a lot of times people think that it has to be this really robust step, but it doesn't. It doesn't have to be super long or complex. Start with just a simple thank you and a recap of the meeting. So at a high level, thank those people that came and were in attendance for the meeting. Thank them for their time, their insights, their engagement, and include a recap of the meeting highlights, not word for word, but what were the key trends? What were key discussion themes and key questions? And also outline any next steps along with who's owning what, as well as any predetermined deadlines as part of the conversation. Related to that, make sure that any action items that were assigned to you and your team are taken in a timely fashion. So make sure you get those done and you're being prompted with everything there. Also, remember to be authentic and genuine. So be real in your conversations. Don't use canned responses or trite sayings and phrases that will stick out, and you want to stick out in your presentation, but that is not the way to do it. It will make you stick out and just look very generic. By allowing people to get to know the real authentic you're establishing that connection that is so important in building relationships with key stakeholders that you're interested in meeting with. And finally, read between the lines and don't be annoying. So these two kind of go hand in hand, and they're often tough to hear sometimes, but try to remember that if you're really interesting to the people that you're pitching to and meeting with, you'll probably be at the top of their inbox. And a lack of response or passive engagement could be a sign that the interest may not be there. So while you can continue some follow-up to a point, you also need to recognize when you need to stop. If you get a no interest response, just let it go. Time is your most valuable commodity as a founder and a startup team. So there will be someone else out there that is willing to meet and seize the opportunity. And so now we wanted to open it up for any questions or an ask me anything with Russ and I.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Clearly so much to take in from the presentation, no matter where you are in the startup journey, super relevant across the board. So appreciate you both on that. We do have a couple questions. So I'll take the first one. The first question is around the 20-minute pitch presentation during matchmaking and how to really divide that up or approach that. As the person who asked the question mentioned, at that point, your pitch is probably pretty well developed, compared to the other folks that may be pitching to the partners. So really, how are you differentiating yourselves? And so I'd say for that, what we generally recommend is splitting up that 20 minutes to be 10 minutes of the presentation and demo and 10 of Q&A. You'll have to know that the partners have obviously done their research on you just as much as you've done your research on them. So between the written application, the day prior to matchmaking with the showcase, there are many opportunities for the partners to learn kind of the basics and overview of your company. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that. I'd really focus on the use cases, that short demo, and then opening up for questions, because at the end of the day, the partners really want to understand your technology, the use cases, and then also how they can work with you, how easy it will be to partner with you from like a compliance security perspective, for example, and really, are you in an enterprise ready stage where you can hit the ground running with that partner? So that's just a quick overview. We're happy to talk more with anyone who wants to speak to that once we get to that round, and you'd be provided with materials that will help you prep for that as well. The next question is more general, and so I'd kick this over to you, Russ and Jennifer. Someone asked, how should we plan for a super quick pitch, 1 to 2 minutes, with regards to story and content?
Yeah, I'll start off and Jennifer chime in. I think I always say, start with your why. We believe we can change the world by doing X, or we passionately believe that ESG is the next wave of consumers. How do we know that? Because we are having this experience. We have 20 years. We've been sitting in these seats, or we see this opportunity. Here's what we do. And I think if you look at that pattern makes it very easy to do a 1 to 2 minute pitch, where you start off with, why are you here? How are you different? and what do you do? And it gets people to understand kind of the context. And I think it's a quick and easy way. Those types of pitches make really, that framework works really, really well to do something like that. Jennifer, I don't know if you have any.
You're on my mind. I was just going to say, start with why. And yeah, I think you nailed it.
Awesome. And another kind of question that I think is, particularly relevant as we look at the MassChallenge FinTech application process is, if we don't ask the customers about their issues, how do we nail down the issues they're facing? And we can, the person who asked the question acknowledges that they can do as much research as they want, but they want to validate their assumptions. So how do you recommend they approach that kind of challenge when they may have an idea of what the customer is interested in or where their technology could be applied, but they don't necessarily know the specifics?
Yeah, Jennifer, I'll let you take this one first.
Ryan's going to toss it to you. Go ahead.
All right. I think, I don't want to de-emphasize the homework and the research, because I think that there's a lot of research that can be done that can really help contextualize the problems that they're trying to solve for. I'll use a great example. Certain partners, have, a great website. They are quoted, in press releases. They have, a timeline of some of the challenges and the opportunities that they're looking to face. Look at who they've partnered with in the past. Look at, recent opportunities or recent engagements that they've done. You're not going to get the details as if you had that opportunity to talk to somebody specifically, certainly. But if you can really get into the mindset of how they look at the world and look at the universe, I think that's really key. And I think when you start to look at the different partners, you're going to see certain themes that go across all of the challenges. I think many of the partners talk about digital engagement as a great example. So make sure that you understand when you hear the language of digital engagement, and again, just as an example, that you really understand what does that mean if somebody's in a B2B space, or if somebody's direct to consumer space, or if somebody is, trying to engage, a different segment of the population that versus millennials versus boomer, in terms of the consumer population, and understand what they're trying to accomplish. Again, I think it's not to be understated that doing the homework and really spending the time to understand who the partners are and getting into how they think about things, companies that they may have invested in, companies that they may have sponsored, business relationships that they have established, you really can get a mindset of what's important to them and who they target. And again, I think even who they target is equally important as well, to really get understanding of where they're trying to go. Certain partners target a certain segment and a certain demographic. Other partners may target a different demographic. If you have an understanding of those two dimensions, you really understand maybe where your sweet spot is to hit a particular opportunity. Or if you're B2B and enterprise, helping them understand how they can be more efficient, scale, reduce risk, generate more revenue.
Yeah, I was going to say the last part of what you said, Russ. I think another example of a common theme that is in a lot of the challenges this year is financial wellness. And that's a really, really broad term. So digging into what that means, does that mean for couples? Does that mean for a longevity economy and an older population? Does that mean millennials in general or families? Digging into what that is and digging into that demographic and truly understanding who they're trying to serve is really important. And I think along those lines, looking at press is something I always suggest. Social, so if they're doing posts on a campaign about financial wellness, what trend do their different posts have? Also, even listening to earnings calls. So as large public companies, a lot of earnings calls can be really insightful about how the company is looking ahead the next 3 to 5 years and what they're looking to achieve and how they're looking to grow. So that's another unique way that will set you apart if you do that research and look at things like that. Also thought leadership, if they're doing any research on this space specifically, try to get familiarized with that as well and what the underlying message of that research is trying to say.
Great, super helpful. And I think to an earlier point that you made in the presentation too, just really remembering that it is a conversation, and there's opportunities for you to ask questions as a startup, and to really keep that, especially in MassChallenge, we really see these as, beyond the traditional vendor relationship and really a growing partnership between the startups and the enterprises. And so we, throughout the judging process with matchmaking, for example, that showcase opportunity is really your opportunity to speak with partners, maybe in a more informal, casual way, really dialogue with them. And then, that translates to the pitch and future conversation. So, yeah,
I think it's also don't act like you know everything. If you act like you're an expert in what you do, and you're really interested and have a passion for this space and you think you're solving something, there's a way to say it that you're not coming across arrogant and that you know everything better. But here's what I've learned from looking at 3 different research pieces and sourcing things throughout. So if you're talking about your TAM or your total addressable market, making sure that you're sourcing things so people know where you've been looking to get your information. I think all of that can be really important as well, and just how you're setting the tone of the presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Let's see. I don't think we have any other major questions coming in right now. Reminder to anyone who wants to ask a question, please put it in the chat or Q&A. We're happy to, the FinTech team is happy to answer questions throughout the application process. You can email us at fintech@masschallenge.org. But really appreciate it, Russ and Jennifer. Again, it's been a super helpful session. And as a reminder, we'll share out the recording of this materials following this webinar. We encourage you to apply. Again, the code is MCFT21SEI. You can see in the chat the website for applications. The deadline is October 8th at noon. And again, please feel free to reach out to the MCFT team if we can be of any assistance throughout the process. We look forward to your application. And again, thank you, SEI Ventures. Great partnership, and we're excited for MCFT 21.
So are we.